Randy was setting this up and he said intentional, and you gave some great examples of ways you reinforce it right now. Something we haven't talked about yet, which I think is a real mystery to most companies that are values led. How do you select talent? People you're interviewing off the street and try and screen them for values. So have you found any interesting ways or approaches to tease out values alignment in the interview process? Because I think that was, I know leaders right now listening to this would love to get some tips on how to do that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Howard Schultz, the Starbucks CEO, said at one time that, resumes can't tell you whether someone will fit into a company's culture, right? And here I am, and it's a technical company. I basically run an engineering company, and I'm not an engineer, right? And so it's very easy for me to observe that when we're hiring a senior technical role, that we're all focused on all of those technical requirements. And frankly, that's just the price of admission, right? Like they've got to be able to fulfill the responsibilities. But the reality is that that's the easy part of screening someone's resume and validating, is whether they have the competencies and the skills to do the work. This is definitely the harder part. But I do think that there's some emerging things happening on this front. We've used something that's called an ethics tool that helps, where people go in, and we've been very open about that, hey, and especially in certain roles. For example, we hired a new human resources leader last year. It was really critical to us that person had our values. And again, I think values are not something, they're what people have, right? It's not, oh yeah, I like Chemex's values, I can go and you do or you don't, right? And so it's really, I think that's the first thing I would say is you do want to find out if that person does share those values. And people are very familiar with behavioral-based interviews, right? Where you're going to go along and say, hey, Brandon, give me an example of, a big challenge that you had and how you overcame that. We're all used to those questions. So you do the same with values. You say, give me an example of where you ran into what was potentially an ethical dilemma and how you resolved that. Give me an example of where, your integrity was questioned and how you resolved that. You will learn a lot about people just by asking questions. And so I don't think you need to be too covert about it. But the other one, and I'm sure you guys have both heard this quote, right? I don't think Buffett is the originator of it, but he talks about this in terms of how you have these in order. He says, we look for three things in people: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, the other two will kill you. So talk about having those things in order, right? So that alone speaks to that there's got to be a hierarchy of these values, because if you had integrity last and you said, well, yeah, they got intelligence and they got energy, so I'm not going to worry as much about that. Boy, if someone like Buffett tells you that'll kill you, I listen pretty closely to something like that. So yeah, I definitely think it's really a decision. HR teams out there's a lot of resources available. I think there's growing awareness that hiring for fit and hiring for culture and values is important. And so, even as simple as something as saying, have you read our values? That's a good indicator right there. Have you read what many people have? That'll tell you something about the candidates. Or here's Chemex's values. Is there anything here that strikes you as interesting or challenging, or that aligns with how you think about things? And trying to spend a little bit of that interview time just getting to see how that person may think and respond. Well worth the effort.
I want Randy to take the next question, but I want to ask just a quick follow-up. Based on that approach, Doran, and you don't name names, but has there ever been a case where you said this person is not going to be a fit based on how they answered one of those questions?
Yes. I would say we have. And so it's only one of several screening tools that we use. I'm a big believer in, there's this saying out there, right? That's hire slow, fire fast. Mm-hmm. Jim Collins has another great saying, which is, it's not, people aren't your biggest asset. It's the right people that are your biggest asset. And so if those things are true, then you've got to be intentional in your recruiting process. And there are many great, peers and colleagues that have quotes that are about this very fact, about the time that you spend, not just developing people rather, but hiring the right people. So yes, I would, to be candid, more often we've made a mistake and we've uncovered something and so that's why we have work to do on this front, because we've hired someone and learned, sometimes relatively quickly, sometimes it takes longer, there's a values disconnect here, which is why I'm pretty passionate about getting better at it, and there's work to be done.